A very good day to all viewers out there. Today we're going to discuss final exam questions from the topic provisions, contingent liabilities and contingent asset. Specifically, that is under Mfrs 137. So we're going to discuss question 5. Yeah, question 5. The question as well as the suggested answer. So let's look at the first one. Question 5A. So the objective of Mfrs 137 provision, contingent liabilities and contingent asset is to reduce the practice of creative accounting by ensuring the application of consistent techniques and disclosure of sufficient information with regards to provision, contingent liabilities and contingent assets. So you are required to give a definition to define the following terms: legal obligation, if you can still recall what is legal obligation, as well as constructive obligation. So both are under present obligation. So it's for 2 marks each. The second part of the question asks about the effect of provision, the accounting effect of provision actually. Provision, which is one of the area discussed under Mfrs 137. So what are the effect of that in the financial statement? So when we talk about effect in the financial statement, what are the effect in the statement of profit or loss? And what are the effect under statement of financial position? So we'll be looking into that. So let's look at the answer. So if you can recall the present obligation that we discussed, present obligation, it consists of what we call obligating event. And as mentioned, present obligation is as a result of past event. So this obligating event will give rise to either legal obligation, denoted as LO, or constructive obligation. So what is legal obligation? We have already discussed this before. Legal obligation has something to do with contract, something to do with legislation, and something to do with other operation of law. So we just need to write that in a proper sentence, like what you can see here. So these are the keywords that we look for. Legislation by way of whatever laws that is guiding a particular area. And the last one is operation of law. So you need to mention that that is an obligation which are derived from a contract, a legislation, or other operation of law, right? And it can be either explicit or implicit. The second part is the constructive obligation. So constructive obligation is an obligation that will derive from entities' action. Basically, the action that as a result of being corporate socially responsible, right? So that is from an established pattern of past practice, past practice, PP, published policy, and it was also due to a specific current statement. So if you can still recall the lecture, so it's a published policy, whether in the newspaper or maybe in a website or wherever that a public would have access to it, maybe in the Facebook page. Specific current statement, an official statement that shows that the entities will accept some level of responsibility, and therefore that created a valid expectation to the parties that are affected that our entity will discharge those responsibilities that were being established through that past practice, published policies, or current statement. Next is the effect of provision. So if you look at the effect of provision, you as I mentioned, look at the effect in the SOPL and what are the effect in the SOFP. So in the SOFP, normally you have equity, you have liability, yeah, and also you have asset. And provision relates to liability. So it will increase the liability. Why increase the liability? You are going to debit the expense. And the expense is being in the SOPL, and you will credit the provision. So when you credit the provision, you are crediting the liabilities in the SOFP. Right. Because of that, in your expense, it has increased, right? So that will be shown in the SOPL as an increase. That is the effect. And increase in expense will normally reduce the profit. And that will also increase the liability. So you need to write them in sentence. So in simple word, increase in expense, decrease in profit, increase in liability. So that is the effect. And this side is the effect in the SOPL, and this is the one in the SOFP. Okay, go to the next one. This is about a scenario-based question where you have a company, Suci Berkat. The company produces and sells industrial chemical products. So chemical product normally will have a lot of impact from the day you start the manufacturing process until it is available for sale. So these are the year end of the company, 30th June. So this is the financial year end. And this is actually the end of the year. So this is the reporting date. You have events 1, 2, 4 that we will be looking shortly. And for that 4 events given, what you need to do is you need to explain what are the appropriate accounting treatment. So you may have to explain whether should that be treated as a provision, should that be treated as a contingent liabilities or as a contingent asset in accordance with the provision under Mfrs 137. The second part, you need to prepare relevant journal entries. So journal entries are normally needed for provision. If it's a contingent liabilities or contingent asset, no journal entries will be required. We look at the first situation. So you have this company, Suci Berkat, where in December 2016, remember, the year end was earlier, if you can check. The year end was 30th June, 2017. So the year end, 30th June 17, and somewhere that was the reporting date, and it starts on 1st of July 16. And here is December 16. So meaning that during the reporting period, if you can recall Mfrs 110. So the customer filed a lawsuit. So you have to read and see what are the keywords. So the word filing a lawsuit shows that you have received a lawsuit and it will probably create a legal obligation. So filing a lawsuit against the company. So lawsuit is an example of present obligation, legal obligation. And that was because of the injury costs when they were using the product. So therefore, this is the past event. The company's lawyer was in the opinion that it is possible. Possible. The word is possible. So you need to look for the word possible, probable. Yeah. So it says that it is only possible that the company will lose the case. So to recognize a provision, number one is that you should have the present obligation. We have this. But here, if you look at what happened here, the lawyer say it was only possible. So that it means that the outflow is not probable, it is just possible. So that does not meet the criteria for provision. So you have to set aside that this is a provision. This is not a provision, but you need to read further. The lawyer estimated that the chances of the company to be held liable is 40% only. 40% are less than 50%, right? Less than 50% is possible. To get it to become probable, it must be more than 50%. More than 50% is probable. Only when it is probable do you recognize as provision. However, if it's possible, and this is going to involve some outflow of economic benefits, that will be recognized as, it will be disclosed as contingent liability. So here, what you will do is, you will start talking about what is the present obligation. And if you can see, these things that we write here, there is a present obligation, all this here are what we actually copy from our question. So there is a present obligation, so you need to state it's a legal obligation as a result of past event. So the legal obligation is the lawsuit. So the one in the purple ink there is the present obligation, legal obligation. And the past event is because you caused injury to the customer while they were using the product. So this is the past event. So the first point. So mentioned about present obligation, and that was as a result of past event. Present obligation, the lawsuit filed against the company for injury caused during the course of using the product. There is a possible outflow. Yeah. However, it is not probable. That's why we say possible. Possible means less than 50%. So if we say possible means, it means not probable. So when not probable means that the recognition criteria for provision is not met. Remember I mentioned earlier, all three must be met, right? So here, the second criteria is not satisfied. Why? Because the chances of losing the case is only 40%, less than 50%. However, there is a reliable estimate of the amount of obligation that may be required to be paid, which is 50,000. So in this case, if you can see, present obligation is met, outflow is not probable, reliable estimate is met. So meaning that this is only 2 out of 3. So therefore, you cannot recognize this as a provision. So the conclusion here, the last part, no provision should be recognized. So if no provision should be recognized, what should you do? You should only disclose this as a contingent liability. And that should be disclosed where? In the notes to the financial statement. And you need to state the nature of the event, that you receive a lawsuit, yeah, because of the injury that were caused to the as a result of using your company product. And you also need to mention that there is an estimate of financial effect of 50,000. So in terms of the second requirement, you are asked to show journal entry. So here, even though there is no journal entry that you need to show, you need to still write no journal entry required. If you cannot simply write 0 or write dash, you need to write that sentence to get this 1 mark. Okay, we go to the next one. Next one is, it's still in the same company. Now it comes to 2017. Remember, the year end is 30th June 17. And this is still within the reporting date because this is February 17. So this is the year end. So this happens here. And this is the beginning of the year 16. So while constructing the company's new factory in Pahang, the construction caused a blockage to the drainage system. Yeah, that was the past event. And the local resident made a complaint of uncomfortable smell. So if they cause drainage but no complaint, there's nothing so much to be worried. But now they made a complaint. Yeah, made a complaint about having uncomfortable smell that was caused by those blockage that comes from our factory. Based on the past practice, so those red ink here is actually your past event. So I have already distinguished one event to another using different color here. So first is past event, and this as you want to see whether there is a present obligation as a result of that past event. So based on the past practice, you are informed that the company has been taking responsibilities based on the past practice. They have been taken responsibility to clean up the contamination costs. So that past practice of taking up responsibility is the present obligation, but specifically constructive obligation. To clean up any contamination caused by its activities. So they will clean up, right? They have been doing that, and therefore the outflow is probable. So there is a present obligation, number one. The outflow is probable. And because they do so, as that would harm the environment of not doing so, it is estimated that the cost of cleanup will be 20,000. So the reliable estimate can also be met. So all three criteria are being fulfilled. According to Mfrs 137, if all three criteria, which is present obligation as a result of past event, second one, outflow of economic resources is probable, the third one, the reliable estimate can be made, so therefore we can recognize a liability. So you can either start with the conclusion first and then give the judgment why you say so, or you can just start with giving the criteria or the condition that have been fulfilled by the company and then come up with the conclusion. So here I start with stating what are the present obligation of the company based on the company's past practice. So there was a constructive obligation. So you are given one tick here to clean up. Your obligation based on the past practice is to clean up. As a result of past events, what are the past events? The contamination that caused uncomfortable smell, right? And that was the first part, right? So we got two ticks there, one here and one here. There is a probable outflow. Why probable outflow? Because the company has been taking up responsibilities to clean up the blockage. So there's no percentage here, but because you have been doing so, people will have the expectation or valid expectation that you're going to repeat the same action over the years, over and over again, right? It created valid expectation to those affected parties. Next. So the second criteria checked. Now we go to the third criteria. Liable estimate can be met. Yes, 20,000. State the amount. State if you have been given the amount. Therefore, a provision for cleanup. Don't just mention the word provision. Mention what is that related to. Provision for cleanup. Yeah. Provision for contamination. Or maybe you can say maybe provision for compensation if it's related to compensation. So should be shown as a liability in the financial statement. So doing that, you get 2.5 marks, right? And the same part, you are asked to show the journal entry. So here, debit cleanup costs in the SOPL under other operating expenses and credit the provision for cleanup costs, 20,000. So that's it for the second part of the 5B. We go to the next one. Okay, part 5B, case number 3. In March 2017, still within the reporting period, the company was again confronted with another legal suit. So they confronted with another legal suit. And that will give rise to a present obligation, because this is a legal suit. So this is present obligation, legal obligation. So number one is fulfilled. What was the reason that is a present obligation? It is as a result of past event, because of the injury suffered by the customer for using one of the company's product. We hope that it's not the same product, it's a different one maybe. So they suffer injury. That injury is the past, this part, the red color here. This is the past event. Present obligation as a result of past event. However, this time around, the company's lawyer believes that the customer was at fault. Maybe the customer did not use the product according to the specification. They didn't follow whatever instruction given. So because of that, that was the reason that caused the injury. Maybe you need to just use it twice a day, but you use it maybe like 12 times a day. So they follow their own instinct, but they don't follow the operating instruction of the product. So they failed to follow the instruction. And the lawyer said it was the customer that was at fault, not us. So therefore, that shows that the outflow is not probable, right? And he is not just saying that, he's saying that it is highly certain that the company will win the case. Why? Because the customer that sue you will be losing, since that was their own fault. So certain that the company will win the case, meaning that the customer will lose. And since the company has never encountered such case previously. Before this, there were no complaint. It was this customer that caused this kind of complaint. So that was highly certain. So when we say highly certain, means the chances is remote, almost remote, less than 5% that we will be held liable, or we will lose the case. So you see that this is not a provision, right? So but there is a present obligation if you look at the answer that I've prepared for you. And there was a legal obligation because of the legal suit filed by them. Right? So the first one, due to the past event, the claim that caused injury. However, there is no probable outflow of resources, as the lawyer expects that the company will win the case, and he regarded that as highly certain that the customer was at fault. So when it is highly certain, means the probability is remote. Probability is remote. So when remote means the chances is less than 5%, you don't have to recognize any provision. You also do not need to recognize any contingent liability. So what you need to do is not doing anything. You just need to ignore the event. No mention is needed. No accounting treatment is needed. So therefore, if you go to part B, the journal entries are also not required, but you must write no journal entries required to be awarded this 1 mark. Okay? I hope you are following what I'm explaining so far. So good. Clear blue sky. Next, we have the last case. You have a senior workers, Anwar. And this Anwar, one of the company's senior workers, involved in accident when he was performing his work. So official duty, he met with an accident, right? So that was the past event. And the company had made an announcement, public announcement, maybe during a bulletin utama or maybe during an Astro Awani, that they will compensate Anwar at an amount of 30,000. So Anwar heard that, and he was happy that he will get the compensation. So the announcement, the public announcement, is actually a constructive obligation as a result of having the present obligation as a result of past event. So there is a present obligation as a result of past event. And the public announcement saying that it will compensate Anwar, shows that the outflow of resources is probable. So number 2 also met. An amount totaling 30,000 was also announced during the public announcement. So the reliable estimate has also been made public. So that third criteria is also met. And according to the company, this was to show the company's appreciation towards him as a loyal employee, right? So here it's clear that there is a provision because all three criteria are met. So you just need to write the answer by taking some of the wordings from the question. So that's why I was using, colors in the question and also colors in the answer. You don't have to do this in the exam, but then it might help you if you have some highlighters of different colors and highlights different points using different colors so that it's easy for you to understand. So there's a present obligation, constructive obligation. What was the constructive obligation? The public announcement made, and the present obligation made by the company was to compensate the customer. Why? Because not the customer, the worker, because he was involved in an accident. So therefore that was a past event, right? This one, right? So the first part settled now. There is a probable outflow. Why? Because the company has made it public, yeah, in the news that they will compensate Anwar to the worker. So the outflow is probable. In addition, there is also a reliable estimate being made. So the three criteria are all fulfilled. You can now recognize a provision for compensation. And that is compensation comes from the word here, compensate. Right? So compensation shall be recognized and shown as a liability. So if you expect to compensate your employee within less than a year, that will be shown under current liability. If you think that you need a longer time to do that, and the outflow is probable in more than 1 year time, that will be under non-current liability. And then this part B asks you to do the journal entry. So you debit compensation costs in the SOPL, which is your expense. You reduce profit, right? And credit provision for compensation in your soft B under liability. In your SOPL under expenses with 30,000 respectively. That's it. I thank you for watching. I hope you learn how to answer the past exam question now so that you can answer more. Remember, practice makes perfect. I'll see you when I will see you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.